And good morning, you're watching Daybreak live on A News, and I'm here to take you through the day's top stories. So let's take a look at the headlines. We did it, Hungary's new leader says after the teaser party defeats Viktor Orban in elections. We will not bow to any threats, Iran says after Trump vows to blockade the Strait of Hormuz. And Pope Leo XIV kicks off his 10-day trip to the continent of Africa. First stop is Algeria. First this morning, election results in Hungary have marked a major shift in the country's political landscape. The opposition Teaser party has secured a landslide victory, resulting in Viktor Orban conceding defeat after 16 years in power. Attention now turns to the final results and the possible political changes ahead.
Hungary's long-serving nationalist leader Viktor Orban has conceded defeat in Sunday's election. The result marked a landslide victory for the opposition Teaser party and is seen as a political setback for some of Orban's allies in Russia and in the White House of US President Donald Trump.
Dear friends, what this election result means for the fate of the homeland and the nation, and what its deeper or higher meaning is, this we don't know. Only time will tell, but no matter how it turned out, we will also serve our country and the Hungarian nation from the opposition.
According to results based on 46% of votes counted, the centre-right pro-EU Teaser party won 135 seats in the 199-member parliament ahead of Orban's Fidesz party. Speaking at Fidesz headquarters, Orban said the results were not yet final, but the situation was clear. He described the outcome as painful but clear. Record voter turnout was reported on election day, with long queues seen outside polling stations in Budapest. At 16:30 Greenwich Mean Time, around half an hour before polls closed, turnout stood at 77.8%, significantly higher than in previous elections.
The task that lies before us is clear. The weight of governance is not on our shoulders, so our job is to strengthen our communities. 2,500,000 voters trusted us. We want to give them this message. We will never let them down. And I don't even need to say, since we have been together for more than 30 years. We've lived difficult and easy, beautiful and sad years, but there is one thing everyone should know, here and in the whole country. We'll never give up. Never, never, never. We will never give up.
If confirmed, the result could bring an end to Orban's 16 years in power and have wider implications for Hungary, the European Union and Ukraine. The shift could ease Hungary's hardline stance within the EU and potentially unlock financial aid for Ukraine that had been blocked by Orban. It could also lead to the release of EU funds to Hungary that have been frozen over concerns about the country's rule of law and democratic standards.
And many European leaders have been watching the elections closely. Poland's Prime Minister has welcomed Peter Magyar's win, and French President Emmanuel Macron has also congratulated Hungary's new leader. But now the next steps will be whether his party will deliver sweeping reforms. Let's take a look at this.
The victory of the centre-right Teaser party in Hungary's national election is being seen as a political turning point for the country. We have done it. Teaser and Hungary have won this election, Magyar said in his address. Following the vote held on April 12th, thousands of supporters gathered in central Budapest along the Danube embankment to celebrate Peter Magyar's win.
Fantastic! Absolutely brilliant, yeah.
I'm very happy.
Been waiting for this for a very long time. This will change everything in Europe, everything. This country is a fine country. It's been for 16 years, almost in an autocratic regime, and it's a really big impact on Europe, the way that this Prime Minister has supported Russia and has the eyes of the US all over it. And this is a really big moment for Europe, we think, and especially for the Hungarian people. I think they have suffered too long under this government, and now it's time for a change.
What it certainly means, though, is change.
Yes.
Much needed change after 16 years of the same ruling. It's about to change now.
Record voter turnout in the election underscores that many Hungarians viewed the vote as a decisive moment for the country's future.
Now let's take a look at the story shaping the day across the globe. And as you can imagine, Hungary is also across a number of newspapers this morning. And we head to The Guardian first. Hungary opposition ousts Viktor Orban after 16 years in power. And as you would have just seen from our two reports earlier, that it shows exactly how Viktor Orban has been taken off his power for the past 16 years he's been there. And the new TISA party leader, Peter Magyar, has taken the win after 16 years. Now, polls close on Sunday, and we know that a number of results are coming in. There are still more results to come, but a large majority has gone over to the opposition party. Orban has described it as a painful but unambiguous election result, and Magyar has pledged to repair Hungary's strained relationship with the EU, crack down on corruption, and funnel funds towards long-neglected public services. He said that his TISA voters had rewritten Hungary's history. Also, there's a reminder that days before the election, we know that we reported on it, J.D. Vance, who is US Vice President, had travelled to Budapest in a bid to help Orban, who US President Donald Trump had repeatedly endorsed, but it doesn't seem that that has actually made a difference in this with that sweeping result that we have just reported on now. And Peter Magyar, which you can now see, speaking there for his win. He said, never before in the history of the democratic Hungary have so many people voted. And he also said, Russians go home. So Magyar supporters chanted this particular chant of Russians go home. And a number of leaders, as I mentioned, Poland's Prime Minister Donald Tusk was one of the first to congratulate Peter Magyar on his win, as well as Emmanuel Macron, who is France's president as well. So the TISA leader has pledged that his first trip abroad is actually going to be to Poland to reinforce Hungary's 1,000-year friendship with Poland there as well. As you can see, flags, celebrations, and there's more to come later on in the programme in relation to this particular win. Now let's go to the next story that's also making headlines this morning, and that's in relation to Iran and the US and the blockade ships from Iranian ports. So overnight on Sunday, Donald Trump has promised to block the Strait of Hormuz after weakened US-Iran talks failed to reach a deal on Saturday. Now, Iran has actually spoken out about this and says it will not bow to any threats, and Trump has said that talks with Iran failed because Iran was unwilling to give up its nuclear ambitions. But Iran's foreign minister spokesperson blamed the US's excessive demands and unlawful requests in regards to that. Now, blocking the strait, Trump told US news broadcaster Fox News that the blockade on Sunday will take a little while, but will be pretty effective, and described it as all or none policy. He also posted on X, his US Central Command team has posted on X saying that the blockade will begin at 10 o'clock Eastern Daylight Time, which is actually 6 p.m. Baku, Iran time this Monday. So very later on this evening is when they're going to action this blockade. And Trump has said that other countries will be involved in the blockade as well, but did not say which ones were actually going to help. Now, the strait's geography has allowed Iran to use it as leverage throughout the war, which has spiked oil prices, as we know, and a number of difficulties because of that, of ships getting through. Now, some experts have actually said that Trump's threat to blockade the strait will only affect a small handful of vessels that are still navigating the waterway. Even though there was a truce, that there was a temporary 14-day ceasefire, not a high number of ships have not passed through the strait. I think right now reports are coming in saying that roughly 7 to 19 ships were able to pass through. So some experts are saying that what Trump is doing will have actually a very little effect in relation to the vessels, and there's a greater scheme of things. It doesn't really change anything in relation to blockading the Strait of Hormuz because it's not fully open anyway. And as I mentioned, the reports are saying that only 19 or so have passed through the strait. But we'll keep you up to date in relation to this particular topic, and we also have a guest later on in the programme to discuss this in more detail. Now let's go to the next story, which is on the BBC website, and that's in regards to the Pope. So Pope prioritises world's fastest growing Catholic region in major Africa tour. So Pope Leo XIV is starting his 10-day trip of the continent. He wants to turn the world's attention to Africa, and that's according to a senior Vatican official. Now this is Pope Leo's second major foreign visit since being elected in May last year, and is a reflection of Africa's increasing importance to Catholicism. More than a fifth of the world's Catholics are in Africa, and he will be visiting 11 cities in 4 countries, which include Algeria, Cameroon, Angola, and Equatorial Guinea. And if we keep scrolling down, there's actually a map of the continent showing these 4 major locations that the Pope will be visiting later on throughout this week. Now, all but one of those countries have a large Catholic population, but he has chosen a non-Catholic country, Algeria, as his first stop, as it holds very deep significance and ties for him. It's the birthplace of St. Augustine, and Pope Leo XIV is the first pontiff from the order that follows his teaching. So it's very close and very dear to his heart, which is why he's going to Algeria first. But the trip comes as rights groups also express their concerns over Algeria's treatment of religious minorities in the country. Now, after Algeria, the Pope Leo will also go to Cameroon, where the conflict in its 2 Anglophone regions will provide a backdrop in relation to that. And as you can see, as we just continue to scroll down, I just want to quickly show the map so that you just kind of get an idea of his travelling, as he will be travelling at least 18,000 kilometres in regards to that, so that you can just pinpoint where he will be. And we'll be covering this throughout the course of the week as well, to find out exactly how he's been welcomed by the different nations on the continent of Africa. As we can see just there with him smiling, he's also received some backlash from President Donald Trump, which we would explain later on in the programme. And as I mentioned, Pope Leo's, this is his second trip outside of the Vatican. Great, so here is where he'll be stopping. So as you can see, number 1 place is Algeria, right at the top, North Africa. There he'll then go to Cameroon. He'll then go to I believe it's Guinea, Central Guinea, and then he will his last stop will be Angola. So I've done it the wrong way around. So it's Angola, Equatorial Guinea there. So the four countries in the continent of Africa. Okay, now let's move to our next story, and that's actually, we're staying in the continent, but we go to West Africa, and dozens feared dead in airstrike on village in northeastern Nigeria. So this is Al Jazeera that's currently covering this story, and many have been killed. Now the numbers we haven't got, but it is Amnesty International says at least 100 or around that amount have been killed by these military jets that struck a village market in the northeast of the country. Now the attack took place near the border between Yobe and Borno states, while an aircraft was said to be engaged in an operation against Islamist militants in the area. Now the Nigerian Air Force said it carried out mop-up airstrikes on identified terrorist locations. The area is the centre of a long-running Boko Haram insurgency, which has forced more than 2 million people to flee their homes and has killed thousands. So there are a number of reports around this. As I mentioned, there are conflicting reports on how many casualties have resulted in these strikes, but we'll keep you up to date when we get more information on those numbers. Well, that was the press roundup for now. Now I'm going to take a quick break. When I return, I'll discuss the rest of the global stories. Don't go anywhere.
And welcome to Primetime. What a show we've got lined up for you today. In a complex world, clarity is power. hours live, diplomacy dissected in a spin-free environment. That's Prime Time with me, Guy Schoen, weekdays on A News.
Welcome back. You're watching Daybreak. Now let's have a look at the global stories. We turn to the US, and US military says it will block all maritime traffic entering and exiting Iranian ports starting today at 6 p.m. Tehran and Baku time. The move comes after US-Iran talks ended without a deal in Pakistan. Both sides say key disagreements remain, especially over Iran's nuclear program.
US President Donald Trump said Sunday the US Navy would swiftly begin a blockade of ships entering or leaving the strategic Strait of Hormuz after US-Iran ceasefire talks in Pakistan ended without an agreement. In a post on Truth Social, Trump said negotiations had gone well and that most points were agreed, but confirmed the two sides failed to reach a deal on Iran's nuclear program. Speaking to reporters after disembarking Air Force One, Trump struck a confident tone, saying very good things were happening regarding the Strait of Hormuz, while also describing Iran as being in a weakened position.
I think Iran is in very bad shape. I think they're very desperate. We had a meeting that lasted 21 hours. We understand the situation better than anybody, and Iran's in very bad shape. And just so you understand, Iran will not have a nuclear weapon. Will not have. There is no way that they're going to get. They still want it, and they made that clear the other night. Iran will not have a nuclear weapon.
United States Central Command said the blockade would begin on Monday and apply to all Iranian ports, adding it would be enforced impartially against vessels of all nations. However, the command clarified that ships travelling between non-Iranian ports would still be allowed to pass through the strait, limiting the broader impact on global shipping routes. Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi said early Monday that US maximalism and shifting goalposts led to the collapse of what he described as a near-complete agreement during talks in Islamabad. The negotiations, held in Pakistan on Saturday, were the first direct talks between the United States and Iran in more than a decade, and the highest-level discussions since the Iranian Revolution.
Now, US President Donald Trump has criticised Pope Leo XIV, accusing him of being weak and on crime and denouncing his stance on nuclear weapons. It comes after the pontiff suggested over the weekend that a delusion of omnipotence is fueling the US-Israel war in Iran.
I don't think he's doing a very good job. He likes crime, I guess. He hit us. Think of it. He's worried about fear. What about the fear when the ministers and the priests and all of those great people that were arrested during COVID, and in many cases they're outside 10 feet apart and they were arrested. We don't like a pope that's going to say that it's okay to have a nuclear weapon. We don't want a pope that says crime is okay in our cities. I don't like it. I'm not a big fan of Pope Leo. He's a very liberal person, and he's a man that doesn't believe in stopping crime.
Turning to Lebanon, and Israel are set to hold initial talks in Washington this week, raising cautious hopes for a ceasefire. But on the ground, violence continues with at least 13 people confirmed dead in Lebanon.
Lebanon and Israel are set to hold an initial meeting on Tuesday at the US State Department in Washington in a step toward possible ceasefire negotiations. The Lebanese presidency says the talks will focus on formalizing a ceasefire and setting a timeline for further discussions, with US officials mediating. The move follows direct contact between Lebanese and Israeli ambassadors in Washington. But Israel says the current US-Iran ceasefire does not apply to Lebanon, keeping the situation volatile. In Beirut, many residents say they have little confidence in the talks as violence continues to escalate. More than 90 people were killed in Israeli airstrikes on Saturday, according to Lebanon's health ministry, bringing the overall death toll since March to more than 2,000.
There is around 10% hope that the negotiations succeed, only 10%. Because of one reason, the United States and Israel are deceivers. They can negotiate with you on something, and negotiations change with them to another thing. For example, they negotiated and a ceasefire happened, and Lebanon was meant to be included in the ceasefire. In moments, things changed, and they removed Lebanon from the ceasefire.
Your enemy is not someone you can expect safety from. They will not give you safety. As you can see, the destruction here, there was no warning, nothing at all, children and women. What can I say to you more? More destruction than this? It's unjust, truly unjust. Lebanon does not deserve this.
Meanwhile, exchanges of fire continue. Hezbollah says it carried out drone attacks on Israeli targets, while Israel says it struck rocket launchers overnight. Air raid sirens sounded in northern Israel, while fresh strikes were reported in southern Lebanon, with casualties confirmed.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said the fighting in Lebanon will continue. During a visit near the border on Sunday, he described ongoing military operations in southern Lebanon as part of security effort against Hezbollah. In a video statement, he said Israel's forces would maintain operations inside the area he referred to as a security zone.
The war continues, including within the security zone in Lebanon, where I was just a short while ago. What we are seeing is that we have thwarted the threat of an invasion from Lebanon thanks to this security zone. We are pushing back the danger of anti-tank fire and also dealing with indirect fire. But there is still more work to be done. We have done tremendous work, achieved enormous accomplishments, but there is still more to do, and we are doing it.
Turning to Gaza, and aid from Spain is being sent by a second flotilla mission aiming to break the Israeli blockade. Organisers say 39 boats set off first from Barcelona on Sunday, with more than 70 vessels expected to join the effort overall. Rough weather means the flotilla will sail gradually before heading into international waters later this week. The mission comes as aid groups say supplies entering Gaza remain insufficient, a claim Israel denies. Armed militants have killed 3 Pakistan Coast Guard's personnel on Sunday in the Balochistan region. This is the first known attack on a patrol boat at sea operating in the Arabian Sea, security officials say. The Balochistan Liberation Army has claimed responsibility. Authorities are investigating the incident and have increased security in the area. Balochistan has long been affected by militant violence. Russia and Ukraine carried out a prisoner swap before the Orthodox Easter holiday, bringing emotional reunions for families on both sides. But hopes that the celebrations might also bring a brief pause in fighting quickly faded, with each side accusing the other of breaking a short-term ceasefire within hours.
Russia and Ukraine exchanged 175 prisoners of war each on Saturday in their latest swap. One of the few areas where the two sides have continued to cooperate during more than 4 years of conflict. Russia's defense ministry said the exchange was mediated by the United Arab Emirates and that the released Russian servicemen were transferred to Belarus for medical and psychological treatment. President Volodymyr Zelensky said Ukraine had also brought home 7 civilians and said most of the released servicemen had been held in Russian captivity since 2022. Returning Ukrainians were greeted by cheering relatives, many holding photos of loved ones still in captivity.
Overall, 182 people have been released. That is 175 military personnel and 7 civilians. And 163 of them had been held captive by Russia since 2022. So this is a real success. It is a very significant achievement. It is very hard to imagine what these people have been through during that time, and you can see that the men are returning in varying conditions.
The exchange came just before a 32-hour ceasefire announced by Moscow to mark Orthodox Easter, one of the most important religious holidays observed in both countries. The truce took effect at 1300 Greenwich Mean Time on Saturday, with Zelensky saying Ukraine would abide by it and urging that it continue beyond Easter. But within hours, both sides accused each other of violating the ceasefire. Russian officials said Ukrainian drone attacks in the Kursk and Belgorod border regions injured 5 people, while Ukraine's military said Russian forces had broken the truce 469 times through assaults, shelling, and drone strikes. The accusations echoed a similar Easter ceasefire last year, when both sides also blamed each other for violations.
Now to South America, and Peru has extended its electoral voting to Monday after Election Day disruptions in Lima. The delays have pushed back results in a tight presidential race.
Voting in Peru's presidential election has been extended into Monday after major logistical failures prevented tens of thousands of people from casting their ballots on Sunday. Authorities say around 63,000 voters in the capital, Lima, were affected after election materials failed to reach several polling stations. The extension also applies to Peruvians voting in parts of the United States. Officials have prolonged voting hours and upheld a ban on campaign activity until the process is complete. The disruption has delayed final results in a highly fragmented race, with 35 candidates vying for the presidency. Early exit polls show right-wing candidate Keiko Fujimori leading with 16.6%, followed by Roberto Sanchez and Ricardo Belmont. No candidate is close to the 50% threshold required for an outright win, making a runoff on June 7th increasingly likely. The vote comes amid prolonged political instability in Peru, with rising crime and corruption as the country prepares to elect its 9th president in 10 years. Public frustration remains high, with many voters expressing deep distrust in the political class. Speaking after the disruption, Sanchez called for transparency and respect for the democratic process.
I don't believe there is fraud exactly as referred to in that context. The same people said the same things before. Send your representatives, put controls in place, and the data is public. Let's play with clear rules. We must respect the process. Exceptional measures have already been taken, as we all called for at the right time.
Final results are expected once the extended voting period concludes.
Now, Pope Leo begins a 10-day visit to Africa, calling for greater global attention to the continent. He will travel to 4 countries and will kick off in Algeria and continue to Cameroon, Angola and Equatorial Guinea. He will visit 11 cities and travel around 18,000 kilometres. The Pope is expected to deliver 25 speeches on a range of issues. A major event is planned in Cameroon, where hundreds of thousands of people are expected to attend. An airstrike has hit northeastern Nigeria, killing hundreds. The incident happened on Saturday night and at least 200 people are feared dead. The strike was carried out during an operation against militants. Local authorities say it happened near a market, impacting many civilians. Officials describe the incident as very serious. Emergency services have been deployed. Witnesses say people were in a panic after the blast. Turning to Benin, and its presidential election is being closely watched as a test of whether the government's development record can overcome rising security concerns. Here's the report.
As Benin heads into a presidential election, voters are weighing a decade of visible economic change against growing security concerns. At an industrial site near Cotonou, young workers are cutting and stitching fabric inside newly built production units. The factory reflects Benin's push to process more of its own cotton at home, create jobs, and keep more value inside the country.
Creating value, generating wealth, and ensuring that wealth is shared among those who produce it, from cotton farmers to the processing of the raw material and the manufacture of t-shirts, military uniforms, and leggings at this facility. The idea is simple. We have the raw material, so why not process it ourselves before shipping it out? We remain firmly committed to this approach within our group.
For the ruling camp, projects like this are part of a broader case to voters that industrial growth, infrastructure spending, and modernized public services are delivering visible results.
Not everyone is lucky enough to have a job these days, but I am one of the lucky ones. I leave every morning and return in the evening, and I am happy with my job.
But analysts say the election is also a test of whether those gains can outweigh worsening insecurity in northern Benin and wider concerns about national stability.
It is very important to contain the deteriorating security situation in northern Benin, as it could have a national impact. In many cases across West Africa and beyond, worsening insecurity has affected the mindset of the armed and security forces and, at times, contributed to coups. So there is a link between security deterioration and political stability at the national level. Benin must be very careful about this risk. The failed coup attempt last December does not mean the danger has been eliminated.
The vote is now seen as a measure of whether economic momentum and visible development remain more persuasive to voters than security fears and governance concerns.
For the past 10 days, all eyes have been on space as 4 astronauts complete a journey not seen in more than half a century. Now they've safely returned to Earth, greeted with celebrations after their historic mission.
The crew of NASA's Artemis II mission have returned to Earth after a historic journey around the moon, receiving a hero's welcome in Houston on Saturday. Astronauts Reed Wiseman, Victor Glover, Christina Koch, and Canadian astronaut Jeremy Hansen landed at Ellington Field near the Johnson Space Center, where they were greeted by senior NASA officials, colleagues, and international partners.
It seems what they were able to accomplish.
This came after the crew were airlifted by helicopter following their splashdown in the Pacific Ocean on Friday. The spacecraft safely returned to Earth, enduring the intense heat and pressure of re-entry, a critical test for future missions watched by millions around the world. Their return follows a nearly 10-day mission that saw them travel close to 695,000 miles, farther than any humans have ever gone in space. Speaking at the welcoming event in Houston, Mission Commander Reed Wiseman became emotional, saying the experience had bonded the crew forever.
Christina and Jeremy, we are bonded forever. And no one down here is ever going to know what the 4 of us just went through. And it was the most special thing that will ever happen in my life.
Launched from Florida on April the 1st, the crew orbited Earth twice before heading towards the moon, flying around its far side, a route not taken by astronauts since the Apollo era more than 50 years ago. During the mission, the crew captured more than 7,000 images, including rare views of the moon and a solar eclipse from deep space. The mission also marked several milestones, with the first black astronaut, the first woman, and the first non-American all taking part in a lunar mission. Artemis II is the first crewed step in NASA's plan to return humans to the moon, with future missions aiming for a landing later this decade.
Over to a quick break now. When I return, I'll discuss the rest of the regional headlines and will be joined by a guest to further dig in to some of the key stories. Don't go anywhere.
On World Business, we meet the boardroom leaders making market-moving decisions.
and find out how leaders are dealing with continuous technological disruption.
Inside Politics delves deeply into the heart of global issues shaping our world today. Join me for your go-to source of political analysis from across the region and beyond.
Welcome back and thank you for joining me this morning. Now we turn to the region, and the collapse of US-Iran talks without a conclusion has sparked mixed reactions in the Iranian capital, with residents expressing a range of views on the outcome.
Tehran residents voiced mixed reactions after US-Iran talks in Islamabad ended without an agreement, deepening uncertainty around the fragile ceasefire. Public sentiment in the capital ranged from defiance to concern. One resident said Iran must remain fully prepared for any escalation.
We must always have the suspicion that they will attack. We must always be prepared. Our nation, praise be to God, in the past 40+ days have been present on the scene. With all its being, it is unparalleled. Our armed forces are ready, and maintaining that readiness makes them stronger every day.
Strong opposition toward the United States and its leadership has been expressed, accusing Washington of pushing unrealistic demands.
They must yield to the demand of the people of Iran. They have surrendered in war, but they must surrender decisively and abandon their excessive demands so that this agreement can be reached, which is in their own interest. I tell to gambler, US President Donald Trump, that you have lost this gamble badly.
On the streets of the capital, the mood of the people was also shaped by long-standing political tensions between Tehran and Washington.
Over the past 47 years, events have occurred that have made us lose our trust in Americans, both from their support for Saddam in the 8-year war and the downing of that passenger plane in the Persian Gulf and the sanctions they imposed on us, the assassination of our scientists. In any case, common sense cannot trust anyone like that. No matter how much we extend a hand of friendship, they will eventually stab us in the back.
The comments come as Iran's leadership maintains a defiant tone following the failed talks, insisting its negotiating position remains firm and that any future agreement would depend on rebuilding trust with the United States.
Russian President Vladimir Putin and his Iranian counterpart Masoud Pezeshkian have held a phone call to discuss the latest developments in the Middle East. The conversation took place following Iranian-American talks in Islamabad on Saturday, which Pezeshkian assessed during the exchange. He also thanked Moscow for humanitarian assistance provided to Iran. Both leaders reaffirmed plans to strengthen bilateral ties as Russia signaled its readiness to continue mediation efforts. Now, the failure of the US-Iran talks in Islamabad underscores persistent divisions over Iran's nuclear program and regional role. US Vice President J.D. Vance confirmed that no agreement was reached, highlighting the limits of current diplomatic efforts, while hosting negotiations signaled Islamabad's intent to act as a mediator. The outcome reveals the difficulty of bridging entrenched geopolitical rivalries without sufficient leverage. Now, where do we turn from here? To further discuss this with me is Tayyab Iftikhar, International Relations Analyst in Pakistan. Welcome to the program.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for having me on your show, and Assalamu alaikum to all your audience from Pakistan.
Great. My first question really is, does the failure of Islamabad talks affect Pakistan's credibility as a mediator in major international disputes?
Not at all, ma'am. It does not undermine our credibility. We have did our best to bring the both parties together. Both of them have been having hostile relationships since 1979. Since the Iranian Revolution, since the death of U.S. ambassador in Iran, they have been having very hostile relationships, and they have fought a war of 41 days recently. So despite all that hostility and despite all that hatred that has openly been shown, it was a great achievement on behalf of the Pakistani government that they were able to bring the both sides on table for a discussion at a moderate place.
And things have now begun to escalate quite quickly. Trump has now said he wants to blockade the Strait of Hormuz, and Iran is saying that that's not something they want. To what extent can Pakistan influence negotiations between the two countries?
Well, you're correct that things have escalated quite fast, but after the talks, even our foreign minister said that we hope that there will be betterment. Pakistan has definitely signaled that it still wants betterment. Both the delegations left Pakistan with smile, both of them entered Pakistan with smiles, and both the sides have actually said that this is not the failure on the part of Pakistani government. So yes, we hope ceasefire prevails, and basically the world needs peace. These talks were not only something that Pakistan was looking forward to succeed. The entire world community needs these peace talks. The entire community needs de-escalation from war. So inflation comes down, oil, gas, other shortages come down. So yes, there has further effort for peace. So Lebanon can be in peace, so Palestine can be in peace, so Iran can be at peace, so the entire world community can be at peace.
And how could renewed tensions impact regional security dynamics from Pakistan's perspective?
Well, repeat the question, please.
Yeah, so what I'm saying is, how could renewed tensions impact regional security dynamics from Pakistan's perspective overall?
Overall, Pakistan from day one wanted Lebanon to be included in the ceasefire. What is happening in Lebanon is painful for the entire world community. Ceasefire must be reached in Lebanon, and only trust-building measures and only a peaceful tone can lead to settlement of disputes without aggression. A peaceful tone, trust-building measures are at this point very necessary. It is very valid to say that definitely if another meeting is held at a same moderate environment, things can get better. We should give peace talks a chance. This can be taken as round one. A round two can take place to have the world community moving forward towards a peaceful settlement, because 41 days of war, so many deaths in Iran, so many deaths in Israel, so many deaths in Palestine and Lebanon have not benefited anyone.
You mentioned Lebanon being part of the ceasefire deal, but Israel really took it off the table. What happened between Israel, the US and Iran when it came to the ceasefire deal that Pakistan brokered? But obviously this was not put in place in relation to Lebanon.
Basically, Pakistan wants the entire region to be at peace. But at this point of time, the world community needs to stand with Lebanon. The world community needs to send its clear-cut message to the government of Israel that enough is enough. You cannot go on using aggression wherever you want. So definitely, it is very necessary that only fanaticism, only radical interpretations of any religion can be stopped once the killing of innocent people stops. No matter how much money Hollywood spends on improving the reputation of the Americans or anything, until and unless there is not a stop at the killing of the people, until and unless there is not a stop brought to the killing of people at the peace level, at the basic level in the Middle East, there won't be peace achieved.
What lessons now do you think Pakistan can draw to strengthen its future mediation efforts?
Well, Pakistan definitely has a good round. Pakistan had a very good round people within Pakistan have appreciated Pakistani government. Even people within the opposition lines in Pakistan have supported and said that it is very good that Pakistani government is holding these peace talks. They have holded these peace talks very well. So Pakistan has learned its lessons that definitely, without avoiding any hatred, without going into hatred for one another, definitely both sides were given an equal playing field, both sides were given protocol, both sides were given respect, and they were given a good atmosphere to perform. So definitely Pakistan has learned its lessons that once you are able to make your mark at a global stage, you will get respect both within and outside of your country. From within your country and outside of your country, you will gain respect if you have achieved something. So it is up till this point of time very good for the government of Shehbaz Sharif that they have been able to bring two very, very, very different powers at the same table.
And why do you think that was a goal for Pakistan to kind of join itself to the global stage in relation to mediating between US and Iran? Also focusing on the fact that there's also border disagreements between Afghanistan and Pakistan. Some might argue that, Pakistan needs to focus on regional tensions within its own borders instead of going to the Middle East.
That is a very legitimate question. That is a very valid question. Basically, Pakistan is neighbor to Iran. Any instability, destability, anything that upsets Iran will ultimately have its ground effect in Pakistan. Pakistan has a very huge population that is very much supportive because being Muslim and because being ethnically and historically close to Iran, that is affected by what is happening. People in Pakistan are not happy with what has happened in Palestine since 7th of October 2023. People of Pakistan are not happy what is happening in Beirut, what is happening in Lebanon. People of Pakistan are not happy what has happened with Iran in the last 41 days. So yes, Pakistan wants this war to stop. It's in the best interest of Pakistan that there is peace. And let me tell your audience one more thing, that inflation has deeply affected the lives of people of Pakistan. The entire month of Ramadan and even after Ramadan, the high oil prices, the high diesel prices, other inflations in the market have very much affected Pakistan. The whole world is affected. Philippines is affected. UK is affected. Germany is affected. Even Easter eggs were affected. But Pakistan, being a neighbor, being a next door friend of Iran, is very much affected. And coming to the other part of the question, it is very valid that when Pakistan is not being able to settle things with Afghanistan, why are they saying for Iran? But the fact of the matter remains that with Afghanistan, we have tried our best. We are still negotiating, and we want the land of Afghanistan never to be used against Pakistan. And Pakistan will continue to do whatever it can to make the land of Afghanistan, the country of Afghanistan, non-harmful for it, that no harm is being conceived from Afghanistan to Pakistan.
And Mr. Iftikhar, one more question, if I may. In regards to what Pakistan has been able to do in being a mediator, how do diplomatic relations now between the US and Iran look on the public scale? Is this a good point for Pakistan right now? Are they in a positive position in regards to the US, Iran and Gulf nations as well?
Yes, your question is very valid, and your question is valid as well as it is something that Pakistan needs to look forward in the future, that what are the relationships and relationships between Iran and everyone there better. At this point of time, both America and Iran know what they want. America clearly knows what Iran is ready to give and what Iran is not ready to give up. The same goes for the other party. So both sides know what they want and what they don't want. And for Pakistan, even in the future, it would always remain important to have good relationships with both the countries. Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif has been openly by President Donald Trump. Field Marshal Sayyid Asim Munir has been constantly being praised by President Donald Trump. He has also said he's my favorite field marshal. So on the other hand, the Iranian government has time to time thanked Pakistan for its support. They have issued songs, they have released songs in our support. So for Pakistan, it is very important that a second round of peace talks takes place. It might take place in Islamabad, it might take place at somewhere else. It might definitely take place due to coordination of Pakistan. But it's very important that dialogue is done for achieving peace, because the harm that has been brought to Iran and Middle East has been very, very devastating for every one of us.
Yes, well, thank you so much, Mr. Iftikhar, for coming onto the program and explaining that to us.
Welcome. It was a pleasure to be on your show.
Thank you. Now turning to Azerbaijan, and the Azerbaijani embassy in Iran has resumed operations. That's according to Azerbaijan's foreign ministry. Officials say the mission will initially operate with a limited staff, including the ambassador and a small number of diplomatic and administrative personnel. Embassy activities will be restored in stages, taking into account security and organizational issues. The move reflects Azerbaijan's importance on relations with Iran and its support for regional peace and stability. Rescue teams are continuing to deal with flooding in Russia after unusually heavy rains in late March and early April. Authorities say more than 500 homes and roads remain submerged, with over 500 people in temporary shelters. At least 6 people were killed, while up to 1.5 million residents were affected and more than 6,000 evacuated, including children. In neighbouring Chechnya, waters have receded and recovery work is underway. 9 suspects have been arrested in connection with a terror attack targeting a police post in Istanbul. That's according to Turkish authorities. A total of 17 people were detained and 2 officers were slightly injured. Authorities say the attack was planned by ISIS and that suspects are believed to have acted within its network and supported the operation. Orthodox Christians in Azerbaijan have marked Easter with traditional services and rituals. Believers gathered in churches overnight, with celebrations continuing throughout the day. Let's take a look.
Orthodox Christians in Azerbaijan are celebrating Easter, one of the most important and oldest holidays in Christianity. We're here in Baku at the Church of Michael the Archangel, where believers gathered overnight for traditional services marking the resurrection of Jesus Christ. The celebrations began at midnight with special prayers and a procession, symbolizing the start of Easter.
In the days leading up to Easter, believers follow long-standing customs, including preparing traditional foods such as sweetbread and curd desserts. On the eve of the holiday, these are taken to churches for blessing, while nighttime services and processions announce the beginning of Easter. On Easter Sunday, families gather around festive tables, share blessed food, and exchange the traditional greeting, "Christ is risen." Truly, he is risen, reflecting the core message of the celebration. Customs such as decorating and cracking eggs symbolize new life and renewal. Despite regional differences, many of these traditions remain common among Orthodox communities around the world.
Easter is a time of joy and renewal for Orthodox believers, from candlelit midnight services to the sharing of blessed bread and brightly colored eggs. The holiday is marked by traditions that have been passed down for generations. Across Azerbaijan, churches remain open as the celebrations continue. Sabina Bobikirova, A News.
It's now time for a break. When I return, I'll have a full update on the latest headlines, plus a look at what's making the front pages this morning. Don't go anywhere.
and welcome to Primetime. What a show we've got lined up for you today. In a complex world, clarity is power. Two hours live, diplomacy dissected in a spin-free environment. That's Prime Time with me, Guy Schoen, weekdays on A News.
Inside Politics delves deeply into the heart of global issues shaping our world today. Join me for your go-to source of political analysis from across the region and beyond.
On World Business, we meet the boardroom leaders making market-moving decisions. And find out how leaders are dealing with continuous technological disruption.
Watching Daybreak live on A News, and if you're just joining me, I'm Nadia Jani, here to take you through the day's top stories. So let's take a look at the headlines. We did it, Hungary's new leader says, after the teaser party defeats Viktor Orban in elections. We will not bow to any threats, Iran says, after Trump vows to blockade the Strait of Hormuz. And Pope Leo XIV kicks off his 10-day trip to the continent of Africa. First stop is Algeria. Now let's take a look at the stories making the front pages this morning, and we head first to the New York Times in regards to Iran war and the US saying that it's going to blockade ships from Iranian ports. Now, where has this all come from? We know that there were key high-level talks in Islamabad on Saturday, but now because those talks failed to come up with a suitable agreement from both sides, Donald Trump has now promised to block the Strait of Hormuz due to these talks, but Iran says it will not bow to any threats. And it comes because Trump has actually said that he believes that Iran was unwilling to give up its nuclear ambitions. Now, Iran's foreign minister has blamed the US for its excessive demands and unlawful requests. And on Fox's, so US news broadcaster Fox is where Trump went on and stated that from Monday, there's going to be a blockade in regards to what's happening there, which will take place 10 o'clock Eastern Daylight Time, which actually is 6 p.m. our time, Baku and Iran time. So we'll definitely be bringing you an update in regards to how the US will conduct that. Now, President Donald Trump has also said a number of countries will help in that blockade, but hasn't given any information as to who those countries are which will be helping. Now, since he made that announcement and since failed talks took place on Saturday, oil prices have actually risen, especially in regards to Asian markets, which have opened this morning. We'll get a better view and vision of what those what oil prices will look like in the rest of the world. But right now they have been spiked, and it's something that we will pay pay closer attention to. Now, in the greater schemes of things, some experts are saying that this won't change much, only because the Strait of Hormuz hasn't really opened, even though there's been a 14-day truce, a 14-day ceasefire. Not many ships have passed through the Strait of Hormuz, so some experts say that this doesn't really add too much because there's been a tiny trickle of vessels passing through the Strait of Hormuz. So we'll see whether or not what Trump is saying will actually provide pressure on Iran to come back to the table in regards to making sure they no longer have a form of nuclear weapons or maybe a nuclear program either. Now let's turn to the next story, and that's over on the BBC website, and that's in relation to the Pope, who is prioritizing the world's fastest growing Catholic region in a major Africa tour. Now, the Pope Leo XIV will be taking a 10-day trip to the continent of Africa, which starts today, and he wants to turn the world's attention to the continent, is what he has said. Now, we know that it's Pope Leo's second major foreign visit since being elected in May last year, and is a reflection of Africa's increasing importance to Catholicism. Now, we know that more than a fifth of the world's Catholics are in Africa, and he'll be visiting 11 cities in 4 countries. Those countries include Algeria, Cameroon, Angola, and Equatorial Guinea. Now, all but one of those countries have a large Catholic population, but he's chosen to go to a non-Catholic country first, which is Algeria, for his first stop, and it holds a deep significance to him because it's the birthplace of St. Augustine, and it's something that he has followed, that is St. Augustine's order and his teaching, so it's something very close to his heart. But the trip comes as well as rights groups express their concern over Algeria's treatment of religious minorities as well in relation to what's going on there. But as it starts today, we'll provide you with an update as to how Pope Leo gets on in relation to his visits across the continent. Now let's move to our next story, and that's on the A News website in relation to Hungary. Now, this is everywhere just because Viktor Orban, after his 16 rule in leadership, has now been removed because Caesar's, his opposition party, has won in a landslide vote. So his 16 years in power is now over. So the opposition party led by Peter Magyar has won the election less than 3 hours after the polls closed on Sunday, and Orban has conceded, describing it as a painful but ambiguous election result. Now, the opposition leader has pledged that Hungary will now repair the strained relationship with the EU, crack down on corruption, and funnel funds towards long-neglected public services as well. And just as a reminder, we know that J.D. Vance, which is US Vice President, was in Hungary this week in Budapest to actually bid and drum up support for Viktor Orban, which it just goes to show that that actually has not had an impact, probably maybe even the reverse, just because of the turnout and the actual grand victory that his opposition party has received because of that. Now, we are going to go into more detail in relation to this story, so I'll head straight to the report with some more information on this victorious win.
Hungary's long-serving nationalist leader Viktor Orban has conceded defeat in Sunday's election. The result marked a landslide victory for the opposition Tisza party and is seen as a political setback for some of Orban's allies in Russia and in the White House of US President Donald Trump.
Dear friends, what this election result means for the fate of the homeland and the nation, and what its deeper or higher meaning is, this we don't know. Only time will tell. But no matter how it turned out, we will also serve our country and the Hungarian nation from the opposition.
According to results based on 46% of votes counted, the centre-right pro-EU Tisza party won 135 seats in the 199-member parliament ahead of Orban's Fidesz party. Speaking at Fidesz headquarters, Orban said the results were not yet final, but the situation was clear. He described the outcome as painful but clear. Record voter turnout was reported on election day, with long queues seen outside polling stations in Budapest. At 16:30 Greenwich Mean Time, around half an hour before polls closed, turnout stood at 77.8%, significantly higher than in previous elections.
The task that lies before us is clear. The weight of governance is not on our shoulders, so our job is to strengthen our communities. 2,500,000 voters trusted us. We want to give them this message. We will never let them down. And I don't even need to say, since we have been together for more than 30 years. We've lived difficult and easy, beautiful and sad years, but there is one thing everyone should know, here and in the whole country. We'll never give up. Never, never, never. We will never give up.
If confirmed, the result could bring an end to Orban's 16 years in power and have wider implications for Hungary, the European Union and Ukraine. The shift could ease Hungary's hardline stance within the EU and potentially unlock financial aid for Ukraine that had been blocked by Orban. It could also lead to the release of EU funds to Hungary that have been frozen over concerns about the country's rule of law and democratic standards.
And many European leaders have been watching the elections closely. Poland's Prime Minister has welcomed Peter Magyar's win, and French President Emmanuel Macron has also congratulated the new leader. But now the next steps will be on whether his party will deliver sweeping reforms. Here's what some of Hungary's people had to say in regards to the victorious win today.
The victory of the centre-right TISA party in Hungary's national election is being seen as a political turning point for the country. We have done it. TISA and Hungary have won this election, Magyar said in his address. Following the vote held on April 12th, thousands of supporters gathered in central Budapest along the Danube embankment to celebrate Peter Magyar's win.
Fantastic! Absolutely brilliant, yeah.
Very happy.
Been waiting for this for a very long time. This will change everything in Europe, everything. This country is a fine country. It's been for 16 years almost in an autocratic regime, and it's a really big impact on Europe, the way that this Prime Minister has supported Russia and has the eyes of the US all over it. And this is a really big moment for Europe, we think, and especially for the Hungarian people. I think they have suffered too long under this government, and now it's time for a change.
What it certainly means, though, is change.
Yes.
Much needed change after 16 years of the same ruling. It's about to change now.
Record voter turnout in the election underscores that many Hungarians viewed the vote as a decisive moment for the country's future.
And Peter Magyar's election win in Hungary has drawn strong reactions across the world. Leaders are calling it a turning point for the country's relationship with the European Union.
Global leaders have widely welcomed the election victory of Peter Magyar, describing it as a major political shift for Hungary and its relationship with the European Union. Across Europe, congratulations poured in shortly after the result, with European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen saying Hungary has chosen Europe and describing the outcome as a return to the country's European path. French President Emmanuel Macron, German Chancellor Friedrich Merz and other EU leaders also welcomed the result, expressing hope for closer cooperation and a more united Europe. From the United Kingdom, Prime Minister Keir Starmer called the outcome an historic moment, not only for Hungary but for European democracy, adding that he looked forward to working with Magyar on security and prosperity. Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk described the result as a glorious victory, while welcoming what he called Hungary's renewed place alongside Poland and Europe. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky also congratulated Magyar, saying Ukraine was ready for closer cooperation and stronger regional stability. In the United States, President Donald Trump did not immediately comment, while Democratic lawmaker Hakeem Jeffries criticized outgoing leader Viktor Orban in reaction to the result. Magyar said the vote showed Hungary's desire to rejoin Europe's political mainstream, as EU leaders signalled readiness to work with the new government and strengthen ties moving forward.
US President Donald Trump has announced a naval blockade on ships entering or leaving Iranian ports following the breakdown of talks with Tehran. The decision comes amid rising tensions between the two sides. Our A News correspondent Ubay Shabander reports from Washington.
President Trump has announced that the United States will impose a naval blockade against any ship entering or exiting Iranian ports on the Arabian Gulf and along the Gulf of Oman, beginning on April 13th. Ships transiting from non-Iranian ports in the region will not be subjected to interdiction by American warships. President Trump gave the Iranian blockade order following the breakdown of talks with the Iranian negotiators in Islamabad. The administration has said that Iran must agree to totally open the Strait of Hormuz and cannot charge ships tolls for safe passage. U.S. officials believe that Iran, which is almost entirely dependent on the export of oil for its economy, will face severe pressure by this targeted blockade, and as a result, the administration hopes that Tehran will agree to key American demands. Other elements in American demands include Tehran must accept the full dismantling of its uranium enrichment program, as well as dismantling existing key nuclear facilities, and a regional security deal that would include ending Iranian support for militant proxy groups in the region. While the ceasefire is currently still holding, the Trump administration has blamed Iran's rejection of these demands for the lack of a long-term peace deal. New reports in Washington indicate that President Trump is considering further steps that he could potentially take against Iran that could also include limited military strikes. The U.S. naval blockade could cost Iran hundreds of millions of dollars a day in lost revenue. President Trump said on late Sunday that other nations are working alongside the United States to prevent Iran from selling its oil. I'm Ubay Shabander, A News, Washington.
And following on from that, the price of oil has surged Sunday night into Monday morning across Asia markets after President Donald Trump said the US would blockade the Strait of Hormuz. Now, those peace talks have failed between US and Iran. Let's take a look at this.
Oil prices rose sharply in early trading after the US announced that it would blockade Iranian ports starting Monday, dealing a fresh blow to hopes of stability in global energy markets. Brent crude, the international benchmark, rose strongly in early trading, while US crude also gained sharply. Wholesale gas prices also spiked 6%, while heating oil, a proxy for jet fuel prices, jumped 10% in early trading. Stock futures declined sharply. Futures that indicate where the S&P 500 will trade fell 1%, Nasdaq 100 futures slid 1.3%, and Dow futures tumbled more than 500 points. Oil prices have been a roller coaster since US-Israeli strikes on Iran prompted Tehran to impose a de facto blockade of the Strait of Hormuz, a conduit for about 1/5 of global oil and natural gas supplies. The Strait of Hormuz is one of the most important waterways for global energy shipments, including crude oil and liquefied natural gas. Before the conflict, hundreds of ships passed through the strait each day, carrying energy to global markets. But since the war began on February 28th, that number has fallen sharply, with fewer than 10 vessels a day managing to pass through.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said fighting in Lebanon will continue during a visit near the border on Sunday. He described ongoing military operations in southern Lebanon as part of security effort against Hezbollah. In a video statement, he said Israeli forces would maintain operations inside the area he referred to as a security zone.
The war continues, including within the security zone in Lebanon, where I was just a short while ago. What we are seeing is that we have thwarted the threat of an invasion from Lebanon thanks to this security zone. We are pushing back the danger of anti-tank fire and also dealing with indirect fire. But there is still more work to be done. We have done tremendous work, achieved enormous accomplishments, but there is still more to do, and we are doing it.
Pope Leo XIV begins a 10-day visit to Africa, calling for greater global attention to the continent. He will travel to 4 countries and will kick off in Algeria and continue to Cameroon, Angola and Equatorial Guinea. He will visit 11 cities and travel around 18,000 kilometers. The Pope is expected to deliver 25 speeches on a range of issues. A major event is planned in Cameroon where hundreds of thousands of people are expected to attend. An airstrike has hit northeastern Nigeria, killing hundreds. The incident happened on Saturday night, and at least 200 people are feared dead. The strike was carried out during an operation against militants. Local authorities say it happened near a market, impacting many civilians. Officials described the incident as very serious, and emergency services were deployed. Witnesses say people were in a panic after the blast. Now to South America, and Peru has extended its electoral voting to Monday after election day disruptions in Lima. The delays have pushed back results in a tight presidential race.
Voting in Peru's presidential election has been extended into Monday after major logistical failures prevented tens of thousands of people from casting their ballots on Sunday. Authorities say around 63,000 voters in the capital, Lima, were affected after election materials failed to reach several polling stations. The extension also applies to Peruvians voting in parts of the United States. Officials have prolonged voting hours and upheld a ban on campaign activity until the process is complete. The disruption has delayed final results in a highly fragmented race, with 35 candidates vying for the presidency. Early exit polls show right-wing candidate Keiko Fujimori leading with 16.6%, followed by Roberto Sanchez and Ricardo Belmonte. No candidate is close to the 50% threshold required for an outright win, making a runoff on June 7th increasingly likely. The vote comes amid prolonged political instability in Peru, with rising crime and corruption as the country prepares to elect its 9th president in 10 years. Public frustration remains high, with many voters expressing deep distrust in the political class. Speaking after the disruption, Sanchez called for transparency and respect for the democratic process.
I don't believe there is fraud exactly as referred to in that context. The same people said the same things before. Send your representatives, put controls in place, and the data is public. Let's play with clear rules. We must respect the process. Exceptional measures have already been taken, as we all called for at the right time.
Final results are expected once the extended voting period concludes.
You're watching Daybreak here on A News. Make sure you don't go anywhere. We're just going to take a quick break.
Hello and welcome to Primetime. What a show we've got lined up for you today. In a complex world, clarity is power. Two hours live, diplomacy dissected in a spin-free environment. That's Prime Time with me, Guy Schoen, weekdays on A News.
Now let's turn to the war in Ukraine. And Ukraine and Russia have not received the same amount of attention as Iran and what that is doing in relation to the war. And Russia is using that as leverage, some might say. Joining me now to discuss this further is political analyst Orkan Nabiev. Now, we also know that there has been a ceasefire, temporary ceasefire for Easter, which both sides say they actually broke during the Orthodox Easter break. Hello, Orkan Nabiev. Thank you for joining me.
Hi, Nadia. Thank you for hosting me.
My first question in all of this, both sides saying that they violated the Easter temporary ceasefire, and the fighting continues there. And Russia has a number of allies as well in relation to that. I just want to quickly bring in the Hungary elections, just because Viktor Orban has conceded and been defeated by the opposition party. Now, Viktor Orban was a close ally to Vladimir Putin. What relationship might Hungary now have with Russia?
First of all, the Hungarian citizens show that they are pro-European and they want to stay and keep the European values. That I'm congratulating the Hungarian people with this such an amazing victory of the democracy and the European values. And considering this, it means that the new government of Hungary will approve the 90 billion credit to that planned for giving the Ukraine for financing its needs. At the same time, the many resolutions and the new sanctions against Russia will be approved, because, like, as we know, that the Hungary blocked 20th the sanction pact that addressed towards the Russia. At the same time, many information that we already know, that Minister of Foreign Affairs of Hungary, that he gave to his vis-a-vis in Russia, the Sergei Lavrov, that all the negotiations and the closed discussions that involved Ukraine and Russia. So it's all what happened inside the European Union. The Kremlin already knew it, being on this like real time. So that's kind of the speculations and the double playing of the Hungary. So right now it will be over soon.
Yes, it seems that, Russia has definitely lost a very key player in relation to it being part of that EU bloc, which would now vote through Ukraine's funding in relation to the war there. Now, just turning to peace negotiations in general between Russia and Ukraine, can the two countries come together in regards to this? We know there's been a number of talks that have stalled because of the US's attention on the Middle East of late, and Russia saying that there's no point coming to the table if the US is concentrated on something else. How might things go towards a more peaceful route to end the war?
This war will not be end with compromises and agreement, because the positions of each side of this conflict, they are diametrically in opposition. They are not. For Russia, Ukraine should be part of the Russian zone of influence. The government in Ukraine should be pro-Russian. There should be some Russian marionette. It could be Yanukovych or Medvedchuk, that they were the Russian, the close allies of Russia. At the same time, Russia will never accept the European integration and NATO integration of Ukraine. At the same time, it's a strategic plan of maximum, strategic plan of minimum. 4 regions of Ukraine should be part of Russia, which is the Donetsk, Lugansk, Zaporozhye, and Kherson. And Ukraine will never give up its territories, and Ukraine never will give up its sovereignty. So, considering this, there is no win in compromise, based on compromise, and there's no win-win situation in this conflict. So one of these sides should be totally lose the war to accept the peace talks, and that's why for 4 years we never seen we never seen the closer approach, and the sides never approached the peace. and it could be some kind of temporary ceasefire, but they will never come to towards the peace. And considering this, in the next couple of years, one of the sides should lose, and now we see that Ukraine gained the parts, like now Ukrainian side became stronger, and Russia feels the more economic.
Oh, Mr. Nabiev, can you still hear me? I think you've cut out there. Hello? No, I think we've lost him in regards to that. Hopefully we might be able to pick him up a bit later. Right, so never mind, we will continue to touch upon that subject a bit later on, either in the programme or later on in a news in general. Now we'll head over to the next story for the day. We turn to fashion, and in particular gloves. One Dutch maker is wowing celebrities with her inspiring and eccentric designs. After finishing her studies in Amsterdam and with very little money, low startup costs helped her launch her label in 2017. Now her unique styles have caught the attention of some major Hollywood stars. Let's take a look at this.
So this pair was made, I custom made these for Cher a couple of years ago, and she really wanted like the short biker gloves, but then more feminine with the full beaded embroidery. And I always think it's very fun to say, so Cher wore these, touch them or try them on. Cher has also worn these. And the next celebrity to wear my gloves was Miley Cyrus, and I remember I didn't even know who it was. Like I got the request for the gloves and I didn't know who it was for. And then someone sent it to me on Instagram and it was Miley Cyrus. And I was tagged, which I was really happy about. Like the fact that Vogue recognizes my work and tags, I think that was very cool. Side job, I worked like 2 to 3 days a week.
Well, that's very interesting. Who knows, but I need to get some gloves to wear for the news programme. You never know. It looks really nice. You got Miley Cyrus, you got Cher wearing these fantastic designs. But anyway, that's the wrap up for the day. That's your news. Well, I'll be back tomorrow morning with the latest round of information. But make sure you stay tuned to A News for a number of updates throughout the day. Take care.